Hi, you're listening to the NewSpace India podcast, a bi-weekly talk show that exclusively brings insights from the Indian space activities ecosystem. I'm your host Narayan, the co-founder of India's first space-focused think tank, Spaceport Sarabhai. Guests on the NewSpace India podcast help you understand space activities-related macro and micro trends within India in all aspects, including space history, local industry, space science, technology evolution, law and policy, art, and more. The NewSpace India podcast is supported by Dassault Systems, a global leader in providing businesses and people with collaborative virtual environments to enable sustainable innovations. Dassault Systems Solutions supports startups, small and medium-scale enterprises, and original equipment manufacturers in developing disruptive solutions for space launchers and satellites. Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of the NewSpace India podcast. Today we have Anil, who is heading the Satcom Industry Association of India, which is a new industry association that is supporting the catalyzation of the reforms in the country for space industry development and has worked extensively in supporting all sorts of companies to then make the pie of the space industry bigger in India. So Anil, thank you so much for taking the time again and welcome to the show.
Thank you, NP.
So now let's begin with a little bit about your own background before we come into what SIA-India does, so that we then make a frame of what you do and then what is it that is in harmony with what you are trying to do with SIA-India. So to begin with, can you briefly talk about what led you into believing that we need something like an SIA-India as of today, and has led you to basically taking a path towards creating such an industry association?
2019, we started having a feeler from the government, various policy which was coming on the way, and the policies one after the other start to being announced in a draft mode, and some of them are getting into consultation process with the stakeholders. And while this was happening, and I was getting feeler from the industry that government is getting reform, satellite reform, but there has to be a body which could provide interface between government and industry. And when we start looking around, we didn't find any single satellite industry body which truly represent the voice of satellite industry. And that time, the group of people who are part of the satellite industry or professional, we started thinking about how we can start with. And finally, in December 20, we finalized that we should go ahead with forming a satellite industry association or Satcom Industry Association. And we started going for it, and their bylaws, their objectives, and also registration process. So there we being, and then officially we launched on 30th March of 2021. So we start coming into action and start raising our voice into the various issues which matters to the space industry or Satcom industry. We feel the need of that time that we must create a body which truly represents the voice of the industry.
Excellent. So from what you have said, I think the key factor is actually the timing, that there is today a need, and also, I guess, the willingness on the government's part as well to open up the industry to the larger industry that is present. So when you look at what you are trying to do with SIA-India, what are the primary goals and objectives that you see for SIA-India, and how do you see this playing out in the coming years?
Yeah, when we thinking of a representation, so which industry we should represent, and we found that the basic that there is not ecosystem in the country. I think they are all working in a silos, and I think the need is that to bring everybody on into the ecosystem, whether they are manufacturers, the service provider, or satellite operators, or the system integrator, or launch vehicle, the ground segment people, and all. We thought that it is the time that we should bring them all one platform, and because they work with each other in the ecosystem. And we're trying to represent all these people who have related to some way or some contribution in terms of the space economy in the country. So that's our objective, which we have set forth in our clearly on a budget, and it's basically to provide a kind of a thought leadership for the satellite industry in India, which truly represent their voice to the government level, where is any policy or making or regulatory decision are taking or licensing matters are or standardization matters are being discussed. So we also feel strongly that the satellite should be our first priority as a Satcom Industry Association, and wherever satellite services or application to be used should be used on a given priority rather than just waiting for satellite system or application to be happen. So that's the area we feel that there is a gap, and I think must raise our voice that satellite should be used at the first instance, and that's why we are raising our concern with the various policy and regulatory body, and we start giving representation to them, and we have created various interest group within our association representing different vertical. Like for example, we have a space infrastructure committee which deals with the large space industry. There they have their own issues, and then we have a startup ecosystem. The startup has their own issues, and we have also the academia, where we feel that academia outreach or capacity building program need to be harnessed. And we have another way, we have the community, which is basically the government institution like ISRO or their allied institutions. Those need also to be worked on. So, and one way we also feel that the space law is also playing an important role. So we also have created a separate committee which deals with the space law. Of course, the policy regulation and standardization is also dealt with one of our committee. So these are the various committees and interest groups which we set forth, and they all work in tandem, and they're trying to bring respective issues on table, and then we discuss, and then the recommendation we send out to concerned policymaker. So this is the basic framework which we have been created and working on.
Right. That's really interesting from, what you mentioned, especially I think the involvement of people within these committees, I think will allow a lot diverse group of opinions, comments coming in to be then consolidated in one way or the other to make sure that the suggestions are all comprehensive at the end. So when you look at how the sector is evolving in India today, do you have a sense of how big is the space industry today? And given the reforms that you are also pushing for now, what could happen in the next 3 to 5 years if some of these things come to fruition?
Yeah, I think all credit goes to the current government. They have noticed it, and they have announced it publicly, and also policy. The space industry or space com industry is in India it's a nascent stage. Whatever the achievement we have done so far, which is circle around ISRO and the industry which has been created in India, that is also heavily dependent on ISRO. It's a very non-significant at this moment. The sector is close to about say 7 billion, which is 2 to 3% of the global market, which is growing. That is $360 billion or so. And we feel that the set of reforms which government is putting forth and the cohesive atmosphere is building, that will boost the size of the market, and we will be able to touch upon something close to about $50 billion in 2030. That's the projection. This also creating the lot of private sector initiative coming into play in terms of the new activities, which are basically asteroid mining, debris cleaning, Earth observation, space tourism, satellite launches, deep space exploration, and of course satellite broadband. These are the new driver of the space economy. We feel that this will definitely be good, and ISRO is playing a formidable role into that, and they have opened up their arms and also created a association with the private sector, and the recent launch, whether it is a moon mission or or a Mars mission, they have private sector played an important role into those missions. And also the launches, the satellite launches or space launches, the private sectors also. We feel that the picture is good and going in the right direction. We believe that the next 2 to 3 years are most crucial to set the ball rolling in the right direction. So we will be able to position ourselves in the global space economy, and India have their own space into that. We feel very strongly, and the one area where we feel that this is happening because there's a new age. Companies are coming and joining this space industry, and it is creating a new area to work on. We feel that this is going to be new frontier in the growth of economy. And so far, the space was not much counted in that. And we believe the next a couple of years, this will carve out the new economic growth in the space sector.
Great. And one of the things that is, of course, very relevant in this sector is that everybody has a different focus and the size of the company may be slightly different. And the nature of the work, they may be very different as well. You have smaller companies like startups that have a completely different focus of trying to develop some new products and they are taking risks. And there are SMEs that are established and they are serving ISRO programs or so on. And their focus may be a little bit different. And you have very large companies like Hughes or Airtel or others who have a different focus and maybe are aiming at something much bigger than these other types of companies which are much smaller can do. So is there anything specific that you can identify that are important for all of these kinds of companies that you think are important to be addressed as of now?
Yeah, you mentioned about the startups and the new companies are coming up. I believe that the startups are quite active and space startups, and it is the this is started about a decade earlier, and then started companies are coming and start working on the space technology, and the numbers are quite good. And as of you count now, there are 50 active startups in India. And when we're looking these numbers into Asia Pac region, we found that this is a good number. Like total Asia Pac region, there is going to be about 390 known startup companies, in which 50 of them are in Japan, and about 100 of them are in China, and 50 are plus in India, and rest are in the other Asia Pac region. So we see that India is in a very well growth pattern in terms of the startup companies are concerned. But these startups need to be, and the government has to play a very proactive role, protecting their interests, protecting their intellectual property, protecting their future plan, and also helping them to grow or collaborate with the foreign companies. For that, we feel that first of all, there has to be clear space law and space policy. Or in the absence of any space, we feel that the policy can be subject to different interpretations. So we feel that the Space Act has to be enacted as early as possible. And in 2017, there was attempt was there in the parliament to bring the space application bill, but that is not finalized. And second, that a space startup should be dealt with a different set of rules, rather not the common rules and regulations, because these are the deep space tech companies, and there are very few of them. If you look at the numbers of the startups in India, there's count to about close to about 36,000 numbers, whereas the space startups are only 50 of them. I think this required a separate handling by the government, not in they stand in the large queue of the startups where DPIIT, which is government arm, which is promoting the interest of the industry, where the startups are. It should be created a separate pool of the space startup, and all the rules and the policy should be governed separately with them, and they should be allowed to use regulatory sandbox. So wherever they are doing experiment, where they're doing some testing, they should be given them on a block in terms of is their waiting period or getting their equipment tested or importing certain components for their product. They have to really struggle a lot. So the government has to play a facilitating role to helping these startups. And also the frequency, because of all this, they work on a satellite frequency, and then available, the government has to make available the satellite frequency at ease to them, wherever they need for experiment purpose or product manufacturing. So they should be made available to them. And all the clearances processes should be simplified with the ease of doing business, especially for the startup and MSME. So these we have demanded from our association side, and we are working with the government to simplify these procedures and rules.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well as very necessary from all of these. I guess the problem also is that many of these companies may not have the leverage and also presence in Delhi to a large extent to talk to a lot of the policymakers to make anything happen for them, given that a lot of them come from different parts of the country, and it's going to be difficult for them to interface using a single body, without a single body, that is. From what you are doing at the moment, are there any like specific requirements that come to your mind for either larger companies that are operating outside the startup sphere? Because I think normally what happens is, in the public discourse as well, startups and smaller companies are highlighted a lot because they feel like that's the new energy that is coming into play. But what is also lost is actually that most of the employment and most of the money comes from large companies that operate in the industry. And they are the ones who contribute the most in terms of jobs as well as the impact that they can create on the economy. So beyond just the startup related questions and so on, what are the primary things when you look at large operators are present in the country, their main focus areas, and what would make it feasible for foreign direct investment and other things to come in for larger operators to either become bigger or new large operators to be then present in the country?
I think the large industry has got their own issues and problems, and I believe there are 20 of them. Large industry like Anand or Centum or Astra, these are the large companies which have grown around ISRO, and they have been supporting ISRO in their production facility last 20 years, and they built up quite a large capacity with them. But the irony is that they are heavily dependent on, due to the pandemic. You see that ISRO has last year only have 2 launches, and one was not very successful. So this industry was expecting to play their role in the other launches also, but due to pandemic, those launches could not happen. So their investments are quite subject to that, and they're also heavily dependent on the budget which ISRO has got, and which is also depend on their manufacturing or their working capital. But over the period of the time, they have built up quite a large capacity with them. And most of the time, their capacities are unutilized. They are worried about their investment, and opening up the space reform. They are also looking for foreign collaboration where the Indian manufacturing could help them into either the ground segment or some component of the satellite or launch vehicles. So they're also looking for it. So that is the one issue. Another issue which is faced by the large multinational companies. They are working for the defense or aerospace project in the country, but at the same time they also work for the Indian space sector. But the one problem which we found that these companies, when it comes to the offset obligation, the space sector is not included in offset obligation. So because these large Indian company also work with the multinational companies in their defense project or vice versa. But when it comes to the offset obligation, these large MNCs are not able to offset obligation with these space companies. That space sector should also be included into offset obligation. So it will help in 2 counts. One is that it will enhance the capabilities of the Indian companies, and they will truly become large enough and global competitive, and income from the export. That's the advantage. And also when the Indian government is requiring anything on the defense space side, so I think Indian companies will also come up to the level where they can play their role. So this dual advantage would be also there. Second thing, we found that the most of the manufacturing company in the country, whether it is electronics or whether it is other sector, automobile, other sector, there is production link scheme, incentive scheme is not applicable in the space sector. So we also demand that PLI scheme should be implemented, to enhance the manufacturing in the country. So these few things which we feel that if the government is take, we have already given representation to the government on these two counts, and we feel that if this be implemented, this will definitely enhance and work for the Indian large manufacturing.
I think those are all very interesting when it comes to how the focus areas and the requirements are also quite different depending on the nature of the company and the activity that they are, doing at the end. So from your perspective, what could make it looking at outwardly, not just inwardly? What I mean by that is that so far what we looked at is what can you do and what the industry do to look at expanding their footprint within India, and how do they actually provide services within the Indian context, so on. Do you also see an opportunity for having to help some of these companies to globalize to a certain extent? Because one of the things that I see to a large extent missing is a lot of these companies are purely operating within the Indian context and are operating as service providers within India. And today, given that the world economy is all global and there's globalization of trade, and many companies outside of India, including the ones in China, for example, operate as multinational companies, and they provide Satcom services and other services that are satellite related outside in all parts of the world. And we see very little evidence of that with Indian companies, where they are not just operating in India, but they're now trying to go global there. So do you see any specific things that would be of aid and support that you guys can do with SIA-India? And then hopefully that will lead to some of the things then opening up to our companies also then participating in the global.
We are working on a multiple direction on this. We understand that India market is small at this moment, but we have a quite a large capacity and professionals available in the space sector. I've been told that the large number of Indian scientists are working with NASA or European Space Agency or likewise other space agencies. So we do have that kind of a knowledge pool. But in the nation stage of the industry, so we have to depend on the global cooperation. First of all, we did in last couple of months that we have established close relationship with international association or bodies. So they are already either they are serving us on in our advisory board, or we have a memorandum of association with them, or we have some of them we have a working relationship. We also working strongly with the standardization. So we feel the global cooperation is the key of the hour, because satellite is a global phenomenon. As you know, that satellites goes up in the sky, it's no more the country specific, it become a global. So, of course, their footprint would be that particular country or maybe region, or if you have a constellation, then you are complete global. A couple of large constellations or mega constellations, Leo or Meo, also see that there's maybe a couple of thousands going to be hovering around the sky next to 2 to 3 years. Those of course, their satellites are being built or satellite being manufactured somewhere or being launched from somewhere. Why can't India be the destination for that? So for that, we see the global cooperation. We feel that launches are happening almost more than a decade. India was successfully, ISRO is launching. But not only the large satellite, there is also plethora of the small satellites or nano satellites, the cube satellites are coming in the way for the serving this area. For that also, we may not be having that big market in India, but this market do exist. Legal provisions are there to work for that. So we believe that there are a lot of companies are making, not necessary for the Indian market, but it could also for the global market. So we feel strongly that the collaboration, foreign company come and set up a shop in India, or Indian companies go out and work for the foreign companies. Both are quite essential to growth of this space. So we understand this, and we are building blocks for this a collaboration. Of course, we are planning in this year a couple of business to business meets where the global company meet the local company and local company meets the global. There is very few attempts have been taken in India to bring the space companies. Only the ISRO biannual meets do take place where the large global company come in India, put up their shop. But the small companies, the Indian companies, they hardly have any access to the global companies. So we're trying to bridge this gap and bring all this company into one platform. And we're trying to build up some events this year. And we will be announcing those events. We already earmark in our calendar of event, but we will be finalizing it soon to help the industry to local reach global or global reach local kind of a thing. We also feel that we also can play a bigger role in regional nation like Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or all the friendly countries. Like since we possess quite a good satellite expertise, this expertise could be help, and we see that there is already something happening in terms of in Nepal, where the Indian company other technologies can be of science and technology. There's an organization called Antariksha. They extended the cooperation for the testing of their satellite. And that way, some collaboration is already started at the regional level.
Again, very interesting blocks and areas that you've identified, having talked to a lot of these people around. When you're looking at this roadmap for the next, let's say, 6 to 8 months that are around, and it looks very interesting, especially because a few draft policies have come into place and there's been a revision of the Satcom policy and others as well. So looks like there's going to be very interesting things that will come out as formalization of these policies will come into play in the next, maybe 6 to 12 months time frame. With all this into place, there's a number of companies that are still, I'm guessing, are looking at getting support and are looking at maybe joining something like an SIA-India to be involved in the greater sphere of influencing policy as well as getting support in terms of trade. What is it that companies can do to either join SIA-India, and what are the things that you would look at offering these companies? Is it like events or other support with respect to basically talking to the government or so on? Other than that, is there other things that companies can get to be a part of SIA-India?
There are a couple of things which is working and help these companies. First of all, I could divide them into two categories: one is threat and another opportunities. The major satellite operators feel threatening in terms of their satellite bandwidth is thinking of allocating to the 5G IMT in India. And there's already regulator is already in consultation process where SIA-India has strongly refuted the claim of carving out or bifurcating satellite band to the 5G. So this threat looms quite large satellite operator, and there SIA-India stands quite tall in terms of representing their issue very strongly, not with the regulator but also the policy maker, that satellite bands are essential for the growth of it for the country and for application which they can provide in terms of connecting rural India, which is close to about 51% rural India is still not digitally connected, and satellite can play an important role in that. So under this threat, we are gaining ground in terms of one voice, their voice to the government, and these companies feel strongly to support SIA-India's and joining them as a member. So this is the large picture. Other picture, which are the opportunity which I just mentioned about, there are two opportunities are coming in the way. One is the opportunity of the ground segment, where the regulator has already come out with a consultation paper, where SIA-India also, in fact, we organized one conference also in the satellite ground segment, the business in India. We have touched upon the regulatory and policy, we touch upon the business economy, we touch upon the standardization process. So we feel this industry can grow, and there will be a lot of collaboration will come from the company, the large companies, whether it's a foreign company, those who are providing satellite ground station, and there is definitely a mood in terms of delinking satellite from the licensing of the operation. So that's the one way. Another area which is coming up with the satellite IoT application. There also feel there is a big opportunity for the satellite IoT companies to come and set up a shop here or collaborate with Indian companies and start providing various applications which are IoT. These numbers, couple of thousands or hundreds or billions could be. So I feel there is too strong major opportunity which the company which are connected with these, whether it's a ground segment or whether through IoT application, they can get benefit of joining.
We've seen a number of drafts come through with respect to the policy changes, especially in the Satcom policy, the remote sensing policy. There's a few of them that have come through now with the technology transfer and so on. From all of the things that you have seen so far as drafts and then also modification of these drafts and so on, are there aspects that you believe that still need to be addressed beyond what is today seen as draft policies that have already come through, that are still missing, that you want to highlight? And these may be very interesting to listen to, because at the end, these may be some of the cracks that have not been addressed yet that can then be highlighted further.
Yeah, last 2 years we've seen plethora of policies are being announced, so whether in draft mode. This is really encouraging that they are got into the public or stakeholder consultation. That was never been the case earlier. The space policy, Spacecom policy, Satcom policy is being discussed publicly, but there's a really good sign that they engaged with the various stakeholders for consultation. The Spacecom draft policy was discussed with the stakeholders, and the revised Spacecom policy was recently discussed after the in-space was found. And we have gone through the policy, and we have provided a very constructive proposal how effectively we can make this policy. Of course, one thing is that the policy, we should appreciate that there are policy framework is getting ready. And fine-tuning the policy is not only one time, it's always revolving. Every time the new policy comes, which replaces the old policy. So there is always a room for improvement, whether it's a current policy or the future policy. We can always. So only thing is that we have to get into the engagement where we can truly represent the industry concern, industry voice, industry business, is that will reflect through these policies. And first of all, this good thing is that there are about 13 odd policies are in the pipeline, and 3 of them, as announced by media, that 3 of them should get finalized, and the rest of them will follow. It's what I believe that is an evolving process, and the first good thing is that there are policy, and that this policy are there to address certain needs, whether it is related to transport or Earth observation, or whether it's remote sensing, whether it is Spacecom. These policies are there, and definitely they will guide certain ways for the Indian companies to grow. And SIA-India would definitely like to get into active engagement with the government on this policy matter. Of course, we feel that this coming 2-3 years, as I mentioned earlier, going to be the crucial, and these will set the role for how best suited we are going to prepare our Satcom industry or Spacecom industry truly global. So that will definitely help.
So there's been also some very interesting investment that is taking place in the country, not just to startups by venture capitalists or so on, but also larger companies who are looking at investing, especially when you look at companies like Hughes or Airtel or others like that, who are putting in a lot of capital to bring in interesting new products and services through the Satcom realm. So with all of this enthusiasm that is coming into play, where do you think we need to look at measuring some of these things? Because one of the things that we look at other countries like the UK or the US or so on, one of the things that they have done very well is looked at what is the measure of the industry when it comes to either investment, either the number of jobs that are being created, or the impact on the economy or so on. And unfortunately, I think in India, we don't really have anything that points to some of these local factors that can be pointed and told to policymakers that this is what is the investment that is occurring in this sector and how large the economy can be if this particular activity can be supported or so on. At least I haven't seen something very concrete, and there's been some very vague numbers saying that the size of the space industry in India is $7 billion or whatever number that is, without any substantiation of why is that number that big. So do you feel like this is a particular topic that SIA-India should be targeting and tackling? And if yes, what are some of the insights that you can share around this particular sizing and monitoring the space economy in India?
Yeah, I think this is a very positive step taken by the Indian companies. The Bharti has taken with OneWeb, and also the collaboration which they have, a joint venture which they have announced with Hughes. That's really positive direction. Of course, the Tata Nelco has also collaboration with Teleset. That is also, and other company will after they will also look for the Indian partners to come in. I think this definitely show that. But I feel there will be some very strong tripling effect will happen when these large companies will start operating with OneWeb, SpaceX, so with Starlink or Teleset or Kuiper would come. So, first of all, they will try to reach where there is no connectivity, and the enterprise to be connected with the higher bandwidth. So, we feel there is a number of jobs would be created in terms of the local collaboration, ground terminals, satellite terminals would also be required at affordable rate. And India it would be we should get ready to this thing. And we also feel there is also room for this local manufacturing to happen. And so the space park is building around in the different states, the Kerala Space Park or Karnataka and Odisha and Telangana. I believe that these are already earmarked space for the land space for the development of the cluster of the space industry in their perspective. So these are the good sign. And once these two large companies like Tata's and Bharti has taken a step, of course, there are other large companies who will also come in, start playing a role. There are a number of Indian companies who are involved into space ventures are the Godrej, the L&T, and of course our PSU like Bharat Electron and ITI. They all will get involved into some way or other, helping to this industry. So I believe that this is a good sign that Indian companies will start plunging into investing into this space economy.
So, final question, Anil. Thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me. I think all the work that you guys have been doing is very interesting, and of course, thank you for giving me an opportunity to participate in the work that you guys have been doing. I think I've also learned quite a lot by contributing in one way or the other, whatever possible manner, to be a part of the events and also some of the work that's been going on in supporting the industry in India through SIA-India. And one of the key things I think the listeners will appreciate is your perspective on where do you see all of this heading in the next 3 to 5 years from an SIA-India's perspective and from the industry's perspective. And what do you see as key things that need to occur so that maybe in the next 3 to 5 years we will reach to a level where the industry is super competitive. Maybe we would have grown 2 times in size with respect to jobs or others. Some of these things from your perspective to listen to will be super interesting.
Yeah, thank you, NP, for inviting SIA-India to present our views. We wish you all the best and continue journey for bring new vistas to the audience of your. We fully support you. Next 3 to 5 years, I just mentioned about there are a couple of policies which are in draft mode. They will start taking shapes and which will further guide the industry to growth. I see there will be a lot more projects will be announced by the Indian industry or the foreign industry to come. We're setting up a shop in India. I see the lot more collaboration to happen. I see there will be a role for startup as a growing, and they're leading the flock which are yet to follow them, because early startups, it's all depends on to how successful they would be in their journey. So I think the next 3 to 5 years the new flock will come which will follow them. So I see, and I also see there is a large role played by the large industry, the small industry to come into collaboration. This will going to happen in next 3 to 5 years. In total, we feel that this is setting up the foundation of the new economic growth in the space area, and it will be, I count them, it will be founding stone for setting up the position in a global hub. And I count them, this will be the most glorious or golden, which will be the bedrock of the future space economy. So these 3 to 5 years are very important, very crucial in terms of setting up set the ball rolling. The policy, the investment, the collaboration, the academia, the investment, all this will come and play the role.
Thank you again so much for taking the time. I think it's very interesting. The work that you guys have been doing is very important and very interesting at the end. And I'm sure that if the industry is to be successful, the work that you guys are doing will be the bedrock of all of that. And I really believe that because at the end, I think we need a voice like you to be present and to be supportive of the industry at the end. So thank you again for all the work that you guys do. And thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, NP, for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Satcom Industry Association. Thank you.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of the NewSpace India podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share this episode with anyone you believe will enjoy listening to it. You'll be able to find the NewSpace India podcast in any of the podcasting platforms that you may be using, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Do subscribe to the podcast in case you want to receive new episodes automatically. I'm grateful if you're able to leave a rating for the podcast, which will help others discover it. Thank you for listening in again, and the next episode will be out in the next 2 weeks as usual.